Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here, and today I want to chat with you guys a little bit about one of the most common weak points that's out there in terms of people's strength. And it's usually stuff like, we know, hamstrings, low back, upper back, rear delt, stuff like that when we're dealing with bigger lifts like the squat and the deadlift. But when it comes to bench pressing, the triceps are one of the common weak links. And one of the things that we need to think about with triceps is that it's very, very difficult to have triceps that are so strong that they're going to create an injury issue for you. So in other words, overdeveloping your triceps doesn't really carry a lot of negatives. And for a very, very large number of us, tricep weakness tends to be the biggest weakness we have in our pressing strength. And that's obviously not true of everyone. I certainly have clients who it's not. I have clients who need more pecs and lats. You have plenty of tricep. Okay, I occasionally have a client who needs more delt. Although front delts tend to be the rarest of the weak links. But they do exist. You guys will see me up in the background up above doing various close grip presses, JM presses, skull crushers. Again, close grip presses with more than one bar. Again, there's a JM press. So these are various common easy to do tricep movements. And it's not to say you don't need to rotate these and don't need other things, because you do. Particularly things like the JM press and the skull crusher can be very, very hard on your elbows if you haven't spent time building up your tendons. But outside of tendonitis concerns, there aren't really a lot of negatives to putting more time and effort into your triceps. Okay? There's not really a problem with it, because number one, they tend to get slightly underused in terms of development for a lot of your pressing and benching and everything, right? And a lot of people say, well, if they get underused, then how can they be the weak link? Because they still contribute as a primary mover, and at certain points of the movement, such as the lockout, they become the most important muscle, right? Become the most important muscle. I'm not saying they're not used at the bottom, and it's not saying pecs don't matter at the top, because they do. But the thing is, triceps get way underused on like the eccentric reps, for example, right? Pectorals, based upon the data we have, take more of the eccentric loading than triceps. Hey, that's one of the issues we run into with benching and hypertrophy, because we know the eccentric component plays a very, very large role in our hypertrophy. It's not everything. It plays a large role. The ratio, even on a bench press, rep per rep, we find that the pecs take a larger percentage of the eccentric, and the triceps get more activation on the concentric rep, particularly the top half. So if you think about it from a hypertrophy perspective, a lot of your volume training, even though the triceps contribute enormously to the concentric rep in your 1 rep max, they tend to get a smaller amount of the load on your various benching and bench variations for your actual training volume and workloads, which is where we get our hypertrophy, right? So accordingly, they tend to be undertrained from pressing. So we need to do more tricep work, right? Because it comes down to this whole idea of minimum effective volume, maximum recoverable volume. Because the triceps end up getting less total volume, they're one of the smaller muscles that could really benefit from doing some extra work from. Okay. The other factor to consider there is that weak triceps can actually cause injuries. They can cause injuries. People say, what do you mean? If you have really strong delts and you have weak triceps, you're going to be predisposed to shoulder injuries. Okay, just like we talk about having anterior delts that are too much stronger than posterior delts, right? We think of a lot of these different muscle balance issues. And triceps are one of those where this can occur. And you want to know how you're at risk. The bar drifts above your face when you bench press. In other words, you can't keep the bar above the lower chest in a straight line, and you feel a lot of delt. When you feel tremendous amounts of front delt and the bar can't be pressed in a straight line and it drifts towards your face, you know that your front delts are overpowering your triceps. People say, well, why? Because the triceps are what allow you to press it in a straight line. They're what allow you to press it and keep the bar above your lower chest. Not to say it's always going to be in a straight line, because we know it's not always going to be the case, but they allow you to do that. And what ends up happening is that the bar drifting towards the face, which again is a longer range of motion, so it should be harder, allows the front delts to take over. Okay, it allows the front delts to take over some of the lockout that the triceps are unable to handle. And when that occurs, it's a form of compensatory strength. Well, the other issue we have there is that it's using a muscle like that with compensatory strength, and you're putting yourself at a bad leverage position for your shoulder joint. Okay? It's not a good position for your shoulder joint to be in with any sort of real heavy weight. So if we talk about concerns of shoulder injuries on a bench press, well, muscle imbalance is a big one. Okay? And a lot of what we think of as bad form in general, it's like I remind you guys all the time, usually for advanced lifters, bad form is a muscle imbalance. Okay, it's not something that you can just walk in and change. There are things we can change, but bar paths, okay, if we have a bar path that's bad and it's at a point where we can get injured, that's compensatory strength causing that. It's compensatory strength, and you can't change it just by focusing on better form. So when we're dealing with issues of compensatory strength, hypertrophy is the only solution. You've got to make a muscle stronger. You have to make a weak link stronger, and oftentimes the only way to make a weak link stronger is with hypertrophy. And the big movements that you're doing to get there clearly are not creating the balance. Right? You get people to say that all the time when you see a weak core on certain big movements like a squat or a deadlift. They're like, well, I do squat and deadlift, so I don't need to train my core. Right? You know those ass clowns? Well, clearly not, because if you're displaying a weak core in your compensatory strength, then clearly it's not doing it. Clearly it's not getting enough training for your abs and obliques, or else you wouldn't have the problem. So more squats and deadlifts are not going to be the solution. Same thing with your benching. Okay? More benching is going to lead to injury. Particularly if it's a bunch of wide grip benching and you're putting yourself in that bad shoulder position. You need to work on your triceps. Extensions, JM presses, board presses. Work with the football bar. You need more tricep. And those are movements to build the triceps. You know, you'll get people say, well, floor press is actually, in my opinion, a better chest exercise than it is a tricep movement. Okay. But your solution is to come in and train more triceps. And again, barring elbow tendonitis because you haven't spent time building the tendons, that's going to be your only real negative. It's relatively hard to see an overtrained condition in the triceps when you're rotating movements. They tend to have actually a pretty high maximum recoverable volume, mainly because they don't get used as much eccentrically on stuff like a lot of your pressing. Alright guys, but that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I will talk to you guys next time.